One last question that I wanted to ask about the social suite while we're talking about these cultural universals and the extent to which cultural universals in general are controversial is whether any of the 8 are more controversial than others. Because, for instance, I mean, to just take the first one on the list, the capacity to have and recognize individual identity, it can't really be debated, or I don't see how it could be debated as, one, not evolutionarily ingrained, but also not necessary or important for human social flourishing. So are there any that don't meet these two criteria, obviously?
In terms, if by controversial you mean what is the evidentiary basis for the claims, I obviously don't think they are controversial in that sense. And that is, I think that the evidence of the centrality of those qualities is quite compelling. But there are a couple that are controversial in other senses. For example, mild hierarchy and in-group bias, which are two features of the social suite we haven't talked much about. There's a lot of controversy about how natural they are, how extensive they should or shouldn't be, whether they are positives or negatives. So, for example,
a Marxist
mild hierarchy.
Yeah.
We are not an egalitarian species. Even amongst hunter-gatherers, when you go and you look at inequality in hunter-gatherers, you find inequality there. For example, if you measure the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of economic inequality, it's a number that goes from 0 to 1. In 0, everyone has the same resources. At 1, one person has all the resources and everyone else has nothing. The United States right now has a Gini coefficient of 0.4. That's at a century-high peak. We're a very unequal society. Morocco has a Gini of 0.4. Scandinavian societies would have Gini's much lower, 0.25 or something like that. But if you go to hunter-gatherer societies, even there's economic inequality. It's been measured like 0.12, for example. So there's some de minimis inequality that is present in any society in terms of, a lot of it relates to genetic variation, right? Some people are born faster than others and stronger than others and smarter than others. And this natural lottery and talents can then give rise to a kind of inequality, let alone the social lottery, which is another thing. Some people are born, let's say, into richer families than others, even in hunter-gatherer societies. So the natural lottery endows us with different abilities. This gives rise to some de minimis inequality. And there have been studies looking at a fantastic study that I cite in the book, for example, so-called knockout studies where working with troops of primates, the experimenters can go in and remove the leader. And then what happens in that society when you remove the leader and you try to make it more equal, let's say? Well, chaos breaks out. You get a lot of fighting amongst the other primates as they're competing for who can be the top dog and so on. So there's a whole set of arguments that I discuss in the book about the benefits of mild hierarchy. But so on the one hand, we're not a completely unequal species, but we're also not a very overly hierarchical species. For example, we're not like walruses or certain kinds of deer species where, for instance, one animal dominates all the mating opportunities, one male will kill all the other males and then have access to all the females, let's say. So we have mild hierarchy, and there are advantages to mild hierarchy, it turns out. Advantages in terms of the flow of information, the suppression of violence, and so on. But not too much. If we get too much hierarchy, we band together and we kill the despot. And this draws on some work by Richard Wrangham and other primatologists who've looked at this topic. And I discuss all of that literature in the book. So we have a kind of mild hierarchy. We have a certain amount of hierarchy that is intrinsic to our species and that actually is advantageous in a number of ways, some of which I've alluded to. But there's controversy about this, right? There's controversy, well, how much is the right amount of hierarchy and how much is too much? And why do we have any? And maybe we don't have any. Maybe we shouldn't have any. Maybe we truly are egalitarian, which I think the evidence rejects that claim.